I never thought one reckless sentence from my boss would flip my entire life upside down. It happened on a Tuesday morning, too early for drama, too late for excuses. I was standing in the glass meeting room, clutching the final prototype of the invention I had poured 5 years of my life into. It was the kind of thing that could change everything: the company, the industry, and honestly, even the world. A patented design valued at over $650 million. My creation. My obsession. My future. And yet, somehow, I didn't even own a piece of it. My boss, Victor Hale, leaned back in his chair like he was enjoying a private joke. Everyone in the room knew he liked me. My work, rather, but he never actually respected me. To him, I was just another name on the payroll. Someone replaceable. Someone who didn't talk back. Someone who didn't break rules. But that day, something in me shifted. He tapped his pen lightly against the glass table, eyes fixed on me with that usual cold amusement. "If you don't like how things work around here, Maya," he said, "you're free to quit. No one is stopping you. But I'll warn you, most people who walk away from me regret it." A couple of executives exchanged awkward glances. They knew Victor pushed boundaries, but this time he was underestimating the wrong person. I didn't respond immediately. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Not because I was scared, but because I was furious. 4 months, I had watched my ideas get dismissed until they were profitable. I had spent nights alone in the lab while Victor received awards for leading innovation. He didn't even know how half of the design worked, yet he acted like it was his legacy, not mine. Still, I kept my voice calm. "All I asked," I said slowly, "was for my name to be included on the patent." "That's fair." Victor let out a short laugh. "Fair? Maya, you're paid to create. The company owns the patent. That's how this works. If you want your name stamped on something, go start a hobby project." His tone wasn't firm. It was mocking. Something snapped inside me right there. Because the truth was, I had already done more than anyone expected. I wasn't just the inventor. I was the only one who fully understood every layer of the technology. Every code. Every circuit. Every algorithm. The patent may have been filed under the company, but the working prototype, the actual functioning piece worth $650 million, only I knew how to run it. Victor pushed the folder across the table toward me. "Sign the release papers," he said, "and let's get back to business." My fingers hovered over the pen. I could feel 12 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting to see whether I would swallow my pride or snap. I didn't do either. Instead, I remembered every moment this job had taken from me: birthdays, relationships, sleep, mental peace. And somehow, it didn't feel worth it anymore. Not under someone like him. So I slid the papers back. "No," I said simply. Victor raised a brow. "No. No," I repeated. "I'm not signing. And I'm not quitting just because you dared me to." His smile disappeared. "This isn't a negotiation, Maya." "Then why give me a choice?" For the first time, he didn't have a quick comeback. His jaw tightened, and I could see the irritation building. But he wasn't angry at my refusal. He was angry because he didn't expect me to stand up for myself. The meeting ended with tension, so thick I could taste it. No one spoke to me as we walked out, but everyone kept stealing glances like they were waiting for an explosion. Victor stormed off to his office, and I went back to the lab, trying to calm myself down. But that wasn't the end. 2 hours later, an email notification popped up on my screen. "Effective immediately, your access to Project Orion has been restricted." My stomach dropped. That was the prototype. My prototype, locked behind a permission wall I once controlled. I tried to override the access, but the system blocked me at every attempt. Victor had moved fast, too fast, and he didn't even bother to talk to me first. My phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. "Victor called a board meeting. He might fire you." I stared at the prototype on my workstation. Sleek. Powerful. A half-finished revolution. Worth more than anything Victor had built in his entire career. And he thought he could take it away with one email. That's when everything inside me went silent. A calm, dangerous silence. Because I remembered something important, something Victor overlooked in his rush to punish me. The patent belonged to the company, but the digital key that activated the prototype, the encryption code that made it functional, The only working version of the core algorithm? Those belong to me. I never uploaded them to the main system. Not out of spite, just out of habit. I always kept the sensitive parts on a private drive until the final testing stage, which we weren't at yet. Without me, they had a $650 million paperweight. And suddenly, quitting didn't sound so scary. I packed only what mattered: my external drive, my notes, and the encrypted device holding the activation key. Then I walked straight past the security desk, out of the building I had practically lived in for 5 years, and into the open air that felt colder than usual. My heart was racing, but my steps were steady. I didn't know if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision I'd ever made. All I knew was this: Victor dared me to quit, and I wasn't leaving empty-handed. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly predict, was how far Victor would go once he realized the truth. Or how dangerous this little dare would become for both of us. Because the moment he discovered what I had taken with me, everything changed. And that was just the beginning. Everything changed the moment Victor realized what I had taken. But at that point, I didn't know what he would do or how fast he would react. All I knew was that the night air felt heavier, like even the city somehow sensed the storm coming. I walked down the pavement with my backpack pulled tight against me, gripping the straps like they were the last steady thing in my life. My phone kept buzzing with messages from coworkers, some whispering warnings, others confused, a few checking if the rumors were true. I ignored all of them. I couldn't explain anything, not yet. Not until I figured out what came next. My mind was racing in circles, replaying the moment I slid the papers back at Victor, the cold look in his eyes, and that email stripping me of access to Project Orion. The whole thing felt unreal, like I had stepped out of my own life and into someone else's. I reached my car and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the empty parking lot. The building behind me glowed from dozens of windows, still lit, the same windows I had stared out of during so many late nights. It wasn't just a job. It had been my entire world. I had worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, to believe I deserved better. And somehow, Victor still treated me like a pawn he could move around whenever he felt like it. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. I started the engine, just as my phone lit up with an incoming call. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. It wasn't a coworker. It was Victor. I stared at his name for 3 long seconds before turning the phone face down. I wasn't ready for him, not yet. If I picked up, he tried to intimidate me, manipulate me, talk circles around me until I second-guessed everything. He was a master at that. But I knew one thing. He wouldn't be calling unless he had already checked the system and realized something wasn't right. I drove out of the lot with my chest tight. Part of me wondered if I was doing something reckless. But another part, stronger than fear, felt a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. When I reached my apartment, I went straight to my desk and connected the external drive. The screen lit up with folders, years of work, experiments, coding sessions, failed attempts, breakthroughs. I scrolled through them slowly, feeling the weight of each memory. I wasn't stealing anything. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was protecting what I had built with my own hands. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something bigger, something I wasn't fully prepared for. I opened the newest file, my private working version of the Orion algorithm. The glowing code lines looked almost peaceful, like they didn't know the chaos starting outside them. This algorithm wasn't just complex. It was powerful. Anyone who controlled it controlled the technology. And anyone who controlled the technology controlled the future of the company. The more I stared at it, the more the fear in my chest mixed with a kind of quiet pride. For 5 years, I had been waiting for someone to acknowledge my work. But now, I realized I didn't need anyone's approval. The proof was right here in front of me. Another call buzzed on my phone. I didn't need to check the name this time. I let it ring until it stopped. Then came a text. "You need to call me back immediately. This is urgent." I exhaled shakily. Victor never sent texts like that. If he was texting, he was desperate. If he was desperate, he knew exactly what I had taken. I turned the phone off and pushed it away. I knew I couldn't stay in the apartment for long. If things escalated, I didn't want to be easy to find. Victor had power, connections, influence, access to resources I didn't even know about. He wasn't the type to sit quietly and wait for things to fix themselves. He would take action, and he would take it fast. I packed essentials into a backpack, charger, wallet, passport, the external drive, and the encrypted device that held the activation key. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like 1,000,000 pounds. I threw on a hoodie and pulled the hood over my head, trying to make myself look smaller. Before leaving, I paused in the doorway and took one last look at my apartment. It was messy in the way all workaholics' places were messy. Coffee mugs on desks, notes stuck to walls, sketches pinned on corkboards. Everything in this room held pieces of Orion, pieces of me. I locked the door quietly and took the stairs instead of the elevator. Outside, the night was darker than before. I could feel the cold in my fingertips as I walked quickly to my car. For a moment, I considered driving out of the city entirely. But running wasn't the solution. I needed answers. I needed to understand Victor's next move. I needed someone I could trust. There weren't many people who fit that category, but one name came to mind: Eli. My oldest friend at the company. The only one who knew how much work I had put into Orion. The only one who never tried to take credit for my ideas. The only one who warned me weeks ago that the board was planning something behind my back. I drove to his place, keeping an eye on my mirrors like someone might be following me. It felt dramatic, but after everything that happened today, nothing felt impossible. When I reached his building, I hesitated for a second before knocking. Eli opened the door with a confused look, his hair messy, and his laptop still running behind him. "Maya, it's late. What's wrong?" I stepped inside, pulling the door shut behind me. "I think Victor is coming after me." Eli's expression changed instantly. "What did he do?" "He locked me out of Orion, and I walked out with the activation key." Eli froze. "Tell me you're joking." "I wish I was." He ran a hand through his hair and paced for a moment. "Maya, he's going to." "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Eli stopped pacing and looked at me with something like fear. "Maya, the board was already talking about securing the patent before the launch. You walking out with the key, that puts you in the middle of whatever they were planning. And trust me, the board doesn't like surprises." My heart sank. I had expected Victor to be furious, but I didn't realize the board was involved. "What were they planning?" I asked. Eli hesitated. "I don't know everything. Just rumors. But they didn't want you to know you were losing control of the project. They were preparing to rewrite the patent credit list before the official release." My jaw clenched. "That meant they planned to erase me completely. And that's not all," he added quietly. "Victor wasn't supposed to tell you anything today. I think you caught him on a bad day. And now everything is spiraling." I sat down slowly, feeling the weight of those words. Everything was bigger than I thought. Bigger than Victor. Bigger than Adair. I wasn't just protecting my work anymore. I was protecting myself. Eli lowered his voice. "You can't go home. Not tonight." "I know. And whatever you do, don't answer Victor's calls." I nodded. I didn't plan to. But before I could say anything else, Eli's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "What is it?" I whispered. He slowly turned the screen toward me. It was an internal company alert. Urgent. Missing intellectual property. Board meeting in progress. Security team activated. My pulse stopped. They were already looking for me. And this time, they weren't going to play nice. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Eli stared at the alert like it was a warning meant specifically for him, and maybe it was. I could feel the air in the room thinning, like the walls themselves knew things were changing fast. My throat felt dry, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. "They activated security," he said finally, voice low. "That means they're not just worried. They're panicking." I swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" "That depends," Eli said, "on how much they think you know, and how far Victor is willing to go." I didn't want to ask, but the question slipped out anyway. "And how far do you think he'll go?" Eli didn't answer right away. He moved to the window and pushed the curtain aside slightly, staring out at the dim street below. He was quiet so long that I almost repeated the question. But when he finally turned back to me, the answer was written clearly across his face. "Farther than you think." I sank back into the couch, my heart pounding in a slow, heavy rhythm. I wasn't afraid of Victor himself. I was afraid of what power he had behind him. A company with billions on the line. Investors expecting results. Board members who saw Orion as their golden ticket. They weren't going to sit back and watch everything slip out of their hands because of one employee. But I wasn't just any employee. And they knew that. Eli came to sit next to me. Look, Maya, you're not wrong for protecting your work. But you need to understand the scale of this. Orion is worth more than you or I can imagine. And whoever controls it, controls the future of the company. I nodded slowly. That's why Victor wanted to erase me from the patent. He wanted control, Eli said. And if he didn't get it the easy way, he was going to get it another way. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I hugged my arms tightly around myself, trying to steady my thoughts. There has to be something I can do. Eli rubbed his forehead. There is. But none of the options are simple. Or safe. I looked at him sharply. Safe from what? The board, he said softly. They're unified when it comes to Orion. They don't want leaks. They don't want delays. And they definitely don't want a public fight. They'd do anything to avoid that. I frowned. You're talking like they're dangerous. He hesitated. Not physically. Just professionally. Legally. They can bury someone under enough pressure to make them disappear from the industry. They've done it before. That didn't make me feel any better. I leaned back, tried to steady my breathing. Somehow, this situation had gotten bigger than I could have imagined. When Victor dared me to quit, I expected arguments, threats, maybe a termination letter. Not this level of chaos. Not security teams and emergency alerts. Not the weight of a conflict that stretched all the way to the top floor of the company where decisions were made behind closed doors. I closed my eyes and tried to think clearly. I need to protect the code. You already did, Eli said. But they're going to assume you have the activation key. That's the part they can't risk. My hand instinctively went to my backpack. The small encrypted device was still inside. Safe, untouched. Only I knew how to unlock it. Only I knew how to run the algorithm properly. What if they try to replicate it? I asked. They can try, Eli said. But you know the truth. The prototype only works because of your layering method. Without that, the whole thing collapses. And that was exactly why I was a threat. Eli leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Maya, listen. You're in the middle of a power struggle. And they're going to frame this as missing intellectual property. Which means they'll blame me, I finished. He nodded once. I felt my pulse spike again. My thoughts scattered, trying to find any path out of this that didn't end in disaster. What am I supposed to do? Hide forever? No, Eli said. But you need to be smart, strategic, controlled. If you panic, they win. I forced myself to take a slow breath. So what's the plan? Eli hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me. Then he lowered his voice. There's someone you need to talk to. Someone outside the company. My eyebrows rose. Who? A lawyer, he said. But not just any lawyer. Someone who deals with intellectual property and whistleblower cases. Someone who understands how companies work when they're trying to cover something up. That word, whistleblower, made my stomach twist again. I didn't expose anything, I said. Not yet, Eli replied. But if they push you, you might need that protection. Another silence settled over us. Heavy, tense, filled with questions I didn't want to ask yet. I rubbed my temples, trying to keep myself grounded. One step at a time. One decision at a time. Eli stood and walked toward his laptop. Let me check if there's been another update. He clicked something on the screen, and I watched him lean closer, eyes narrowing. His face shifted, slowly draining of color. What happened? I asked, fear returning like a sharp jolt. They're escalating it, he said quietly. The alert isn't just company-wide anymore. They're pulling your access badge status, your email, everything. And he hesitated. They've temporarily flagged your account as a security concern. I felt a tight pinch in my chest. A security concern? Why? They think you might leak something, Eli said. Or that you're planning to sell a prototype. That's insane. I know, he said. But they need a narrative. Something that makes their reaction look justified. I sat back overwhelmed. They were painting me as a threat to justify their own actions. I knew companies could be ruthless, but I never expected to be on the receiving end of it. But the more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. Why react this fast? This aggressively? They could have just called me in tomorrow. Eli sighed. That's what scares me. I think they were already planning something for tomorrow. Something they didn't want you to know. My breath caught. What do you mean? I've been hearing rumors all week, Eli said, about a change in leadership, about the board wanting to merge Orion with one of their partner companies, something that would give them more control over the patent. My chest tightened. So they were pushing me out quietly. Yes, he said. And you walking out with the activation key wasn't part of their plan. I pressed my fingers against my temples. Everything was spinning. This is a mess, Eli. That's why you need help, he replied gently. And that's why we need to move before they do. Move. The word echoed in my mind like a warning and a promise at the same time. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere they won't expect, Eli said, grabbing his coat. And before we leave, you need to see something. He picked up his laptop and turned the screen toward me. An email was open, an internal message sent from a board member to Victor. The subject line was simple. We can't afford a loose end. My breath hitched, and the message underneath was worse. Find her. The message on Eli's screen didn't feel real at first. My mind refused to accept what my eyes were reading. But the words stayed there, sharp and cold, like they were carved into the screen. Find her. I felt my breath catch and stay trapped in my chest. My skin prickled, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the walls closer, like the entire apartment was folding in around me. Eli didn't speak. He knew there was nothing to say that would soften the impact. They're not going to wait, he finally whispered. They're already moving. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. We have to go. Now. He nodded, reached for his backpack, and stuffed his laptop inside. The urgency in his movements fueled my adrenaline. I grabbed my own bag tightly, checking twice for the device with the activation key. It was still there, tucked into the side pocket. Knowing that tiny encrypted piece of metal was worth more than anything I had ever touched made me even more aware of how risky every second had become. Eli locked his apartment behind us. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. I felt like someone was listening, watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. My footsteps were light on the carpet as we moved quickly toward the stairwell. Neither of us spoke. Words would make everything feel too real. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around us like a warning. I pulled my hoodie tighter, glancing up and down the empty street. A single streetlight flickered above us, casting sharp, jumpy shadows. Eli led the way to his car parked a few feet down. As we reached it, his eyes flicked across the street. He froze for half a second, just enough to make my pulse spike, but then he shook his head. Thought I saw something. Probably nothing. Probably. But in the tension swallowing the air, probably didn't mean safe. We got in the car, and Eli locked the doors immediately. His hands gripped the steering wheel, the knuckles tight. First, we put distance between us and the company's search radius. Then we figure out the next step. Search radius? I repeated, trying to breathe normally. They have tracking systems, Maya, he said. Everything from badge locations to registered devices. They can't access your personal phone unless you installed something stupid, but they can monitor the company network and cross-check anything unusual. I forced myself to nod. So where do we go? To someone who doesn't live online, Eli said. Someone who won't ask questions. The way he said it made me uneasy, but I didn't have the luxury of overthinking. He drove quietly at first, the city lights blurring by the windows. My head leaned against the seat, but my mind was racing too fast to rest. Every red light felt like a threat. Every passing car made me hold my breath. I kept checking the mirror, expecting headlights to follow us, expecting someone to step out of the shadows. 10 minutes into the drive, Eli's phone chimed. He glanced at it, frowned, and then handed it to me. It's from a coworker, he said. Open it. I unlocked the screen and read the message. It was short, hurried, and terrifying. Security is checking access logs. They know you entered a restricted drive before leaving. They think you copied the Orion algorithm. I shook my head. They're jumping to conclusions. No, Eli said softly. They're preparing for worst-case scenarios. And in their minds, the worst-case scenario is you. The car grew quiet again. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I stared down at the message, reading it again and again as if it might change. But it didn't. Another message arrived seconds later. Victor is pushing for emergency action. They think you're planning to leak the tech. Leak the tech. The accusation felt unreal, like something from a bad movie, but it was happening to me. And if they convinced the board, then the narrative would spread. And once a story spreads, it's almost impossible to take back. They're painting me as the villain, I whispered. They're trying to protect themselves, Eli said. And in their eyes, blaming you is the easiest solution. I looked out the window, watching buildings blur by. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, he said quietly. But now you're in the middle of it. We drove for another 20 minutes, crossing into quieter neighborhoods with narrower streets and dimmer lights. Eventually, Eli made a sharp turn and parked behind a row of old garages that looked abandoned. He turned off the engine but didn't open the door. Before we go inside, he said, there's something you need to understand. I turned to him, waiting. You're not just holding the key, he said. You're holding proof. Proof of what? Proof that the board was planning to cut you out. Proof that someone mishandled the patent process. Proof that Orion isn't as complete as they claim. He paused. And if that gets out, it could destroy careers. Maybe even the entire launch. I blinked. You think that's why they're panicking? They don't panic for no reason, Eli replied. They panic when they have something to lose. The weight of his words sank slowly into my chest. This was bigger than me, bigger than my fight with Victor. The board was trying to hide something serious. And they were willing to spin the situation however they needed to keep it buried. We stepped out of the car quietly. Eli led me through the narrow row of garages to a metal door hidden behind a rusted dumpster. He knocked once, twice, then paused before knocking again. A code. The door opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit space that smelled faintly of metal and dust. A man in his late 40s stepped aside to let us in. He didn't smile, didn't greet us. He simply looked at Eli, then at me. This is her, he asked. I hesitated. Her who? Eli answered for me. The person they're looking for. The man nodded once. Come in. You're not safe out there. His voice sent a cold ripple down my spine. I exchanged a look with Eli, and then we stepped inside. The door shut behind us with a heavy finality. The inside was cluttered with old computer towers, cables, monitors stacked against the walls. It looked nothing like a place someone lived in, and everything like a place someone hid things in. I kept my bag close. The man gestured to a cleared space at a metal table. Put what you brought on the surface. I tensed immediately. Why? So I can help you, he said. But I can't help you if I don't know what we're protecting. Eli stepped beside me. It's okay. He's on our side. I wasn't fully convinced, but I slowly unzipped my bag and placed the encrypted device on the table. The man stared at it like he already knew what it was. Like he had been expecting it. I knew Victor would slip eventually, he said quietly. And when he does, someone always gets caught in the crossfire. I blinked. You know Victor? I know the company, he answered. And I know what they're capable of when they feel threatened. My throat tightened. So what do we do now? He leaned closer. Now, we prepare for what's coming. Because trust me, they're not going to stop. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until they get this back. His fingers tapped the device. Or until they make sure you can't use it. My pulse hammered. What does that mean? I whispered. He looked up at me with a seriousness that sent a chill through my bones. It means the climax is coming, he said. And you need to decide, are you going to run from it? He paused. Or through it. The moment he stepped back into the hallway, the air felt heavier than before, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The dim lights cast long shadows on the floor, and every soft echo reminded him that something was shifting beneath the surface, something he hadn't even begun to understand. He thought the situation was already complicated, the secrets already too deep, but the next few minutes would prove him wrong. When he reached the stairwell, he noticed a faint glow coming from the lower level. It wasn't there earlier. He froze, trying to listen, but all he could hear was the distant hum of old machinery. Curiosity tugged at him, but so did caution. He had already been warned once, and the strange recording he found earlier still played again and again in his head like a quiet alarm. But the light didn't flicker like a normal bulb. It pulsed, slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Something about it felt intentional, and that made him move. As he descended the stairs, each step creaked beneath his weight. The air grew cooler, and a faint scent of metal drifted upward. He reached the bottom and saw the door slightly open. Someone had been here recently. He pushed it gently, letting only a sliver of light guide him, and stepped into the lower corridor. The glow was coming from the last room on the right, a room he had never seen unlocked before. His pulse quickened as he reached the doorway. Inside, the walls were covered in old files, sketches, and diagrams. Some were pinned neatly, others were scattered in messy clusters. But what caught his attention was the whiteboard in the center covered in symbols and notes that looked like instructions, warnings, and even predictions. Everything seemed connected, but none of it made sense yet. Then he saw the photograph. It was taped to the corner of the board, slightly bent, showing a blurred image of the same device he saw upstairs earlier, but this one was different. It was larger, surrounded by cables, with a countdown timer displayed under it. And beside the device stood a person with their back turned, wearing the same jacket he had seen on a stranger earlier that night. His chest tightened. Someone had planned this long before he got involved. Just as he reached out to touch the photo, he heard footsteps. Fast, direct, coming straight toward the room. He ducked behind a cabinet, trying to control his breathing. The footsteps stopped at the doorway. The pulse of the strange light reflected off the walls, but the figure didn't step inside. Instead, the person stood still for a moment, as if listening. Then they walked away, but only slightly, enough to make it clear they weren't leaving the area. He waited until the steps faded before he slipped out, moving silently down the hall. But the moment he turned the corner, he heard something else. A phone vibrating. It wasn't his. The sound was coming from an open locker on the left. Inside, a small burner phone flashed with a new message. He picked it up. The screen displayed a short, direct text. "You're late. We moved tonight." His throat tightened. He wasn't supposed to see this. He wasn't even supposed to be here. But now he had a piece of the mystery no one expected him to find. "We moved tonight." Move what? Or who? And why tonight? He put the phone back exactly as it was, making sure nothing looked disturbed. Then he turned to leave, but the hallway lights flickered twice, the same pattern he noticed earlier. It wasn't random. It was a signal. Someone was controlling more than he realized. He made his way to the main floor, and the atmosphere felt even stranger. The tension in the air was thicker now, and he could sense the shift, like the story was moving into darker layers he hadn't prepared for. Every instinct warned him that the second twist wasn't something small. It was something that could change the entire direction of everything he thought he knew. As he reached the entrance, he paused. A shadow moved across the glass door outside. He stepped forward slowly, trying to see more clearly, but before he could reach it, his phone buzzed. A new message. A no number. "Stop looking. You're already involved more than you know." His heart dropped. Whoever sent it had eyes everywhere. They had watched him move through the building. They knew exactly what he found. And worst of all, they knew he wasn't going to stop. The street outside was empty when he stepped out, but something about the silence felt wrong. The same unmarked van he noticed earlier was now parked closer to the entrance, almost like it was waiting. He glanced around, pretending not to notice, but the back door of the van shifted slightly. Someone was inside. He crossed the road, head down, moving with controlled calm, even though his mind raced. Everything was happening too fast. The device, the secret room, the message about tonight. And now this been following him again. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. Halfway down the block, the van engine started. He didn't look back, but he heard it roll forward slowly, matching his pace. His pulse hammered. He turned the next corner quickly, entering a narrow alley where the walls felt too close and the lights too dim. The air smelled like dust and old water. He walked deeper until he reached the end, a dead end. The van stopped at the entrance of the alley. His breath caught as the side door slid open mid-shadow, mid-silence. For a moment, he considered running or climbing the fence, but before he could move, a familiar voice called out from the van. A voice he never expected to hear in a place like this. It wasn't an enemy. It was someone he trusted. Someone who shouldn't be here. And the expression on their face wasn't angry. It wasn't confused. It was scared. More scared than he had ever seen them. "We need to talk," they whispered urgently. "And you need to listen. Everything you think is happening is only half of the truth." His world spun. Another twist. Another secret. Another layer he didn't know existed. And whatever they were about to say, he knew it would change everything. The van door stayed open, waiting. And he stepped closer, heart pounding, knowing the real danger was only beginning. He stepped into the van, and the door slid shut behind him with a low thud that echoed through the narrow alley. The inside smelled faintly of dust and engine oil, and the dim overhead light flickered as if it was struggling to stay alive. The person he trusted, the one who had called him inside, was breathing fast, eyes darting around like they were afraid someone else might be listening. "You should have left it alone," they whispered, hands trembling slightly. "This wasn't supposed to involve you. But now we can't stop it without you." He frowned, trying to understand. "Stop what?" "I saw the device. I saw the messages. I know someone is planning something tonight." They nodded slowly. "Yes, but you don't know why." Before he could question further, the driver, a silent figure he hadn't noticed at first, spoke for the first time. "We're running out of time. Show him." The person beside him pulled a small tablet from their jacket and tapped quickly. A video loaded. It wasn't long, but every second felt heavy. The footage showed the same room he had found earlier, the strange diagrams, the whiteboard, the device, but this time, the camera angle was closer, clearer. And in the corner, taped to the wall, was another photo. One he hadn't seen before. It was him, standing in the stairwell. From hours before he even knew the building had secrets. His breath caught. "This doesn't make sense. I never." "You were being watched long before you found anything," they said. "Because the plan was never about the device. It was about you." His chest tightened. "Why me?" The driver glanced back through the mirror. "Because you're the only one who can stop what's coming." The van turned sharply, speeding toward the industrial district. The city lights blurred outside the window as the tension inside grew heavier. He stared at the tablet again, rewinding the video. The timer on the device wasn't counting down to destruction, it was counting down to activation. And activation meant someone was trying to trigger a system that had been dormant for years. A system only he had access to. He didn't even know how. He finally asked, voice low, "What does the device do?" His friend swallowed hard. "It wakes up the network your father built. The one he shut down right before he disappeared." His world tilted. "My father's gone. He left nothing behind." "He left everything behind," they whispered. "You just didn't know." The van screeched to a stop in front of an old power station, the same one he had passed earlier without thinking twice. The gate was already open. Lights glowed inside, pulsing like the heartbeat he had followed in the basement. Someone was already there. They stepped out quickly, and his friend grabbed his arm. "Listen, you can shut it down. You know the passcode. You used it your whole life without realizing." "My whole life?" he asked, stunned. "The numbers you always use. The same sequence your father taught you when you were young. It wasn't random. It was meant for this." The realization struck him like cold water. The 3-digit pattern he used out of habit, for locks, for passwords, for everything, wasn't just a personal preference. It was a key. A literal one. Inside the station, the sound of machinery filled the air. Sparks flickered across the metal grid floor. At the center stood the device, larger now, connected to cables that ran along the walls like roots of an ancient tree awakening after years of silence. And standing beside it, controlling the interface with fast, practiced motions, was the stranger in the jacket. The same person from the photograph. They turned slowly, a thin smile appearing. "I knew you'd come. You always do." He stepped closer, anger and confusion mixing inside him. "Why me? Why go through all of this?" "Because your father locked away something powerful," the stranger said calmly. "And he made sure only you could open it." His friend whispered behind him, "Don't listen. They want control, not answers." The stranger tilted their head. "Control? No. I want truth. I want the world to see what was hidden. He kept it buried for years. But tonight, we unlock everything." The timer beeped. Less than a minute left. He felt torn between fear and a strange desire to finally know the truth about his father. But he saw the cables heating up, the glowing panel turning brighter, and he realized the activation wasn't safe. It wasn't meant to be used. His father didn't shut it down to hide power, he shut it down to protect people from it. He moved toward the control panel, and the stranger stepped in his way. You activate it, not shut it off. That's what you were born for. No, he said quietly. I was born to choose. And with one swift motion, he reached past the stranger and typed the code. His code, the one burned into memory since childhood. The machine lights flickered violently, then dimmed. The countdown froze. Silence spread through the station. He exhaled slowly. It was over. Or so he thought. Because just when the tension finally began to settle, the machine emitted a soft tone. Not a warning, not a restart, but a message. A message addressed directly to him. If you are seeing this, it means I trusted you to make the right choice. But there is one more truth you must face. His heart stopped. The voice was unmistakable. It was his father. Alive or gone, he didn't know. But the recording continued. The real system isn't here. This was only a trigger. The real one activates the moment you shut this down. A chill raced down his spine. The stranger's eyes widened. His friend gasped. Because a new light turned on behind them, something hidden deep within the walls, something no one had noticed. The real device. He had stopped the first one. But the second? It was already waking up. The second device hummed to life with a deeper, slower pulse, almost like it was waking up from a long sleep. The sound vibrated through the metal floor and into his chest as he stepped back, trying to understand what he had just triggered. His father's recorded message ended with a faint static crackle, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the danger itself. For a moment, none of them moved. The stranger stared at the glowing panel like they had been proven right, while his friend took a step closer to him as if preparing to run. But he didn't run. He slowly approached the source of the light and saw that the walls had parted slightly, revealing a hidden chamber. It wasn't a large room, more like a vault. Inside it, the second device stood on a raised steel platform. But unlike the first one, this wasn't made of wires and screens and circuits. It looked almost unfinished, a skeleton framework with only the core completed. A glowing cylinder spun slowly inside the frame, steady and warm, not chaotic like the earlier machine. He felt a strange calm as he entered the room. The air was warmer, cleaner, almost like stepping into a preserved memory. And then he saw something he never expected, a small metal box lying next to the device, labeled with his initials. His father had left something behind for him. Not for the world, not for the stranger. For him. His hands were shaking as he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed from time but carefully protected. He recognized the handwriting immediately, and for a second, he forgot about the machinery, the danger, the countdowns. He just saw his father's words. My son, if you're here, you chose to stop the wrong hands from using what they don't understand. I knew one day you would face this choice, but I also knew you would not run from it. This second core is not a weapon. It is a storage of everything I tried to protect. Every file, every design, every piece of the patent they chased. And it belongs to you now. Use it wisely or destroy it. Both choices are yours, not theirs. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. So the $650 million patent everyone wanted wasn't power, it was information. Not something that could destroy cities or change governments, but something that could change industries, reshape futures, and expose the greed of the people who had tried to steal it. His father had hidden it here, so only someone who understood responsibility would find it. Behind him, the strangers stepped forward slowly. Their voices softened. So it was always you. He trusted you more than anyone. He turned to them, still holding the letter. He trusted me to choose. And I'm choosing to end this. His friend nodded, relief washing over their face. Then let's shut it down before it spreads anything. He walked toward the second device and looked at its panel. Unlike the first machine, this one didn't have a countdown. There was no threat, no activation process, just a single glowing button labeled release. He paused. Release what? He whispered. His friend read the small text under it. Release ownership. It clicked. His father had built a system that transferred all rights, all control, directly to whoever pressed that button. No company, no boardroom, no boss could claim it, and no one could force it away. He reached out, but the stranger gently placed a hand on his arm. If you activate it, you're taking the patent for yourself. Once you do that, everything changes for you. You won't get to go back to your old life. He gave a faint smile. My old life was gone the moment my boss dared me to quit. He pressed the button. The device glowed brighter, humming softly but peacefully. A series of lights moved across the spinning core, and he felt a small vibration in the floor as if the vault itself was acknowledging the transfer. Then everything stopped. The core dimmed. The machine powered down completely. A small panel slid open beneath the core, revealing a single data chip. He picked it up carefully. It was simple, unmarked, almost ordinary. But inside it was the entire blueprint of his father's work, the real $650 million secret everyone had been hunting. For the first time in days, he felt the tension in his shoulders lighten. The crisis was over. The machines were silent. The building wasn't shaking or blinking or threatening to explode. It was just quiet, peaceful. The stranger stepped back, accepting his choice. His friend let out a long breath of relief. As they left the vault, he realized the power station felt different now. Less threatening, more like an old chapter finally closed. The van outside was still waiting for them. The city lights looked softer, not blurred by fear anymore. He climbed in and held the chip in his palm like it was the last piece of his father he had. On the drive back, he stared out the window, thinking about everything that had led him here, the arguments with his boss, the pressure at work, the dare that pushed him over the edge, the discovery of the hidden room, the chase, the twisted truths, and, finally, the message left behind by the only person whose judgment he never questioned. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, freedom. By the time they reached the city, the stranger had disappeared quietly, leaving without asking for anything in return. His friend stayed with him, insisting he shouldn't be alone after everything. They walked together through the quiet streets until they reached his apartment building. For a moment, he stood there, unsure of what came next. "You're going to change things," his friend said softly. "Not because of the patent, because you're not like them." He nodded, putting the chip safely in his pocket. "I'm going to finish what my father started. But this time, I'll do it on my terms." As he went upstairs, he felt strangely calm. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need applause. He didn't need to prove anything to the boss who dared him to quit, or the people who tried to steal what wasn't theirs. He had something far more valuable, clarity. In his small apartment, he sat down at his desk and placed the chip beside his laptop. He didn't try to open it yet. He just stared at it, thinking about the journey, the danger, the trust his father had placed in him, the choice he had made. He knew that tomorrow he would begin rebuilding everything. Not the same way his boss wanted, not the way the company imagined, but in a way that actually helped people. A way that honored the person who spent years creating something meaningful. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. The story wasn't about running away with a $650 million patent. It was about discovering the courage to walk away from people who never saw his worth and stepping into a future built by his own hands. The threat was gone. The mystery was solved. The conflict was over. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The night outside was quiet, and the city kept moving, unaware that one small life had shifted in a massive way. But he knew, and that was enough. As he finally drifted into sleep, the last thought on his mind was simple. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't taking something with you. It's taking back control of your own story.